Everything's going well. Everything's going well.
I like the hoodie, by the way. Anti-social
Oh
lifting club.
yeah, I didn't even know about this company. I found it. I was like looking for, I don't know, just I needed some new clothes, and I was like, I'll support some like smaller, strength training esque companies. So someone turned me on to barbells and bacon, and I was like, this is
I
perfect.
think I've heard of that before. I find it interesting how like I think there's such a clear division between the two different parts of the fitness industry by the clothing that people wear. Like I still have family members who sometimes like they're like, "Oh, Kill's into fitness, so I'm gonna get him like a Gymshark shirt or something like that." And it's just something I would never
You're like,
even
oh, yeah,
consider wearing.
yeah,
And I think it blows people's mind that like there's a lot of people who train who just literally wear like cotton t-shirts and hoodies.
yeah, yeah, literally. Yep. I mean the only t-shirts I own, like I own a bunch of either t-shirts I get from meets or like volunteer. Like I spotted and loaded at Nationals, USAPL Nationals last year, and they gave you shirts because all the loaders had like these special
Yeah,
shirts. So I have like four of those. Obviously like my own collaborative strength t-shirts, but like that
I've
and
got
just
the black sheep thing as well.
yeah, like yeah, I don't own like these high-end nice t-shirts. I might buy like a nice hoodie
No.
or some joggers, but
Yeah.
I try to support as many smaller brands as I can.
Yeah. And when you were doing the volunteering at Nationals, that must have been exhausting. Was that just like a full day of loading and
Oh,
unloading bars?
so yeah, pretty much. So that was impromptu. It was not planned at all. I was there coaching lifters and they were just short staffed. And because Sophia is just like the nicest person in the world and can't say no to people, I ended up on the platform. It was pretty wild, but I mean, it gives you some experience doing that stuff, which
She
is fun.
volunteered for you. That was so nice of her.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, so I was there coaching lifters, and she goes. So she's a national referee. So she goes and
Okay.
she judges, but she gets paid for that. And not that the
Okay.
spotters and loaders don't get paid, but they definitely don't get as paid as much as the referees. And
I'd
it's a
imagine
lot,
the
the
refing
work
in
is a lot more
powerlifting
taxing.
is a pretty thankless job because all I ever hear about the refs is people getting pissed off about getting red lighted.
Yeah, I mean they don't like we went to Las Vegas. I don't know which collegiates were yeah, Las Vegas. Oh no, I'm thinking of in Chicago. We were in Chicago.
Hmm.
We were there for an entire week and you pretty much you're in the red by the time you go home. They pay you, yes, but like
Yeah.
and they feed you, but you're in the red. You go there to network and, you know,
Yeah.
maybe try to get clients, things like that. So, it's
And
fun.
the majority of your clientele, like from what I can tell, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of like intermediate level powerlifters.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, cool. That's
Novice,
awesome.
yeah, beginner, intermediate. I don't have enough clout to get the big names.
Yeah. Man, you just got to get one Larry Wheels and you are set.
I know. And then
I'm actually pretty disconnected from like powerlifting in terms of like who the really big people at the moment are. Is John Hack still considered one of the best at the moment?
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I mean, so there's obviously like a bunch of different federations and the disparity between tested and untested and um all that stuff. So like,
and then
raw,
there's the gray area of tested with quotation marks.
yeah. I feel like USAPL does a pretty good job, but I mean, people know how to beat the tests, and if you know,
Sure.
it, yeah, and I've heard of like like things happening in the labs, like it's like I don't know if you happen to know somebody that works in any of these labs,
Uh-huh.
I don't want to do like speculation stuff here, but um, for the most part, USAPL does a pretty good job, but I know the other federations don't. Especially because we don't even do like an untested division like
Hmm.
say USPA does, or I don't even I'm not as familiar with the rules of the other federations like RPS or APF or WRPF, but I don't even think that they necessarily have any sort of like untested and I think it's just like one big pool and like
I always just assume it's untested when that's the case.
yeah, I yeah, because if you are clean, why would you go to one of those meets?
Yeah.
just to compete against a guy that's on PEDs. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, like I've got no objection to people taking PEDs, but I've always
Oh,
thought
me
it's very
neither.
chicken shit if you have like two options and they're literally giving you the option to do the untested one and you take PEDs and go into the tested one.
Yeah, I mean that's the only problem I have is like just don't cheat, you know. Like I
Yeah,
have no if you want to do PEDs and go compete in the, you know, in the untested feds, like cool, have at it.
yeah.
But like don't try to sneak into a tested meet
Uh-huh.
because you know it's tough. You know what sucks too is like I see and I hear about some of these people. I see them at the local meets and you know that they might be doing something, you know, and it's like you're not strong to go compete against untested guys.
Yeah,
So therefore you stay around here and try to compete against tested people to make yourself
yeah.
look better, which is super lame.
Yeah, real
I,
chicken
I
shit
tend to
stuff.
think
And
that
it's
hopefully
just,
I was gonna say, hopefully I just hope that those people tend to get caught before they get to a national stage. And once they get to a
yeah,
national stage, they're more likely to get hit anyways. So
yeah, they're fucked. What was that? There was some kind of a scandal a while ago. It was a guy who did you see that? It was a guy at a powerlifting meet who was like he had like equipped briefs or something like that hidden
you
underneath
talking
his
about the guy
singlet or
who wore
something.
the are you talking about the guy who wore the slingshot under
Maybe
his
that was it. Yeah, yeah. Was that
yeah,
it?
that was I want to say that was IPF Worlds Masters Worlds in like
Yes. And there was that
2021.
video of the guy following him
Yeah,
out of the
he like
building.
chased him down. Like the
Yeah.
guy got off the bench like this. Like you
Like
could like
T-Rex
see like
arms and
yeah, like he comes out to the thing like this, and then he like gets down and he grabs the bar and he like, you know, and then he gets up and he
he did it
runs
really
off.
fast and he ran
He
away
did
as
it
soon as he
really
finished the
fast. Yeah,
rep.
and he ran off behind the curtain, and then someone
Yeah.
chased him into the bathroom or something. Like it was pretty wild.
I just don't get that with powerlifting because like there's not very much money at stake. It's not like a very prestigious sport. It's not like cheating at the Super Bowl or something like that, you know?
No.
And for the most part, it's really a sport where it's you versus you because there's only a few people who are in contention to be battling it out with somebody for like the deadlift record or something like
Oh
that.
yeah,
So I
absolutely.
don't get that mindset at all.
I don't get it either, man. To be honest with you, I'm
How's your own training going anyway?
my own training's going great actually. Well, not this past week. I was sick this past week. I got a stomach bug or something, and
I saw, yeah, you let the Instagram audience give you a bit of motivation to get down there.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It felt like absolute trash though.
Yeah, I know that
So
feeling.
I think besides those couple days though, I mean, I still, you know, you still go and you do what you can do, but other than that, it's going great.
Nice.
What about
And do you have
yourself?
any? Well, my training's been kind of try not to lose any more muscle and strength than is absolutely necessary when you're dropping like 13 kilos of body weight, 15
Oof.
kilos. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm using macro factor right now. I'm not really trying to like lose too much. I'm more trying to like create a better dietary pattern because like every time I don't track, I kind of just go off the rails and like I'm not eating enough protein. I tend to like
Yeah.
just overindulge with carbs, yada yada. So every time I track, I tend to just improve my overall dietary patterns. Like I start eating protein at every meal. I start eating a lot
Yeah.
more veggies. Like just like looking at the data, and I'm like, shit, I need to like, how can I
Yeah.
manipulate this to like not have all of like fit, 250 carbs left over at night, but I can't eat protein and I can barely eat any fats. So it's like, how can
Yeah.
I more evenly distribute this out throughout the day? And that usually always helps me. So I'm currently doing that, and I've unintentionally lost probably like, I don't know, 2 or 3 kilos. Um, which is it's really not a bad thing. I'm kind of like almost thinking maybe I should just continue on. Like if
Yeah.
the weight's trending down, like let's keep doing it. But there's always like that thought in the back of my mind that's like, how much strength are you gonna lose? You
I
know?
know. It's
And it's like as a big guy, it's like probably not much until I cross a certain threshold, you know? And
yeah.
it's like, but where I don't know where that threshold is.
What I found
I'm kind of assuming
interesting.
it's probably around 100 kilos right now because I weigh in at like I was trying to average around 110. I've been weighing in consistently like 107, 108.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking like another like 7 kilos would be probably a significant amount of body weight to lose, and I'd probably see a dip in some performance. Even though that like I've never experienced it, but I've seen other people, I've coached other people that like their body tends to calibrate. Like, yeah, your
Yeah.
performance is going to drop initially and like you're not going to feel very good while you're training. But like once your body kind of adjusts to that, like you really don't lose much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like as long as you're still training, you're like still trying to train at like a similar level. Like, it's gonna suck at first, but I've seen the body just kind of calibrate it where it averages out over time. So
Yeah. Well, it's crazy because I set myself a really loose goal of initially, I think I just wanted to get to like 85 kilos. So I was 95 kilos. And the reason it was a loose goal was because of what you were saying there, where I basically wanted to see how much strength I would lose. So it was
yeah,
like, if I get to 85 and there's like 30 kilos gone off the bench bar, then, I'm definitely going to like
shit,
put the
it's a
brakes on
lot.
it there.
Yeah,
That would be a lot. And I didn't really have any idea what to expect because I've only ever done one cut before and it was only like maybe 6 or 7 kilos.
yeah,
And uh, one thing that I've really taken away from cutting is it's taught me, well, number one, you don't lose as much strength as you think, or at least I haven't anyway. And I've lost strength. Not the lifts that I have struggled with haven't been the ones I've expected. Like
hmm,
my bench and my overhead press actually are about the same. And actually, my overhead press is stronger now in terms of relative to my body weight than it was at the start.
that's interesting.
But my deadlift has felt like absolute shit for some reason. I don't know why.
Mm,
I think it's maybe leverage is changing or something. Um, but
that
the
could be
big
it.
thing
It could
that
be,
it's made
I
me,
always think like the energy deficit has to play a role too, right?
yeah, like the deadlift, and a guy that I'm coaching he's
And
kind
like
of
the
doing a really
deadlift, you're using
similar.
like not to cut you off, but like with the deadlift,
No,
you're obviously using much more musculature than you would with like the overhead press
yeah, it's
or
just
even
the
the bench.
deadlift
So
day is just so fucking draining. There's
yeah,
just, I can still hit a lot of volume on the day where I'm doing bench or overhead press, but the deadlift day, like I did 5 sets of
asking
10
the
on
shit out of
deadlifts
you.
yesterday. And the thing is, like, I'm keeping the volume fairly high so that I can maintain as much muscle as possible.
Mhm.
And just doing volume deadlifts when you're in a calorie deficit fucking sucks. It just
Dude, doing
feels like
volume
death.
deadlifts ever sucks.
Yeah. But this
Just
just
in
like,
general.
because I have a bit of a theory. I'm not entirely sure how well it checks out, but I think a big reason why people get a lot weaker when they're doing a calorie deficit, outside the obvious thing that they don't have the full amount of resources for gaining, is that, like, that research that shows that like people's bodies will try to kind of like counteract a shift in homeostasis. So like if
Mhm.
you get someone who's overweight to go into a calorie deficit, usually they'll stop doing as much normal day-to-day activity. So they'll lie down more, they won't get as many steps in, they'll stop fidgeting as much.
Mhm.
This really weird thing happens to me when I'm in a calorie deficit where I'll be like doing a really hard set of squats or deadlifts, like something very energy intensive.
Mhm.
And on like a pure like reps and reserve basis, like I know that I have the ability to do 5 reps more or whatever. But psychologically, like this voice in my head just becomes really loud and it's like, you don't need to do it. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Just don't do it today. And I feel like your brain, when you're in a calorie deficit, just tries to stop you expending as much energy on training. And so
Yep.
as a side effect, you just stop lifting as much. And maybe that's a big reason why so many people lose so much strength and muscle when they go into a deficit, especially a big one, like if they try to drop like 5 kilos in 2 months
Yeah.
or something.
No, I would totally agree with that because I've had similar experiences and I have like velocity data to corroborate
Sure.
that
So
some
very
way where I'm
measurable.
like, because I mentioned that in my story yesterday because someone was asking me about like velocity with singles and like how to compare them or something. I forget the exact question, but I've noticed personally that like my subjective experience may fluctuate with given load or like
Hmm.
a given velocity value, but like the numbers don't lie. So like if I hit an RP8, say, like squat, and the velocity value is like what corresponds to my 8 RPE, but it feels like a fucking 10, I've had that happen to me before too, where it's like, man, I
Hmm.
know I could do 2 more reps, but like I might die. I mean, like,
Yeah.
yeah, like and this has been in times where like I've in an energy deficit,
Yeah.
um, and that there might be other things playing in, like your own, uh, uh, I don't know, expectations about your performance when it comes to, oh, I'm in this energy deficit. Is my performance going to be up to par? How am I going to have to adjust today? Like all those things,
Yeah.
I think influence your performance a lot more than people think they do.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
expectations are huge because when I'm training with other people, I have a great session, even if like, I'm in a 500 calorie deficit or whatever. It's the days when I'm already feeling a little bit hungry and I'm training by myself and kind of have in
Yeah.
my
And the
head, like
thoughts are
maybe,
going, it's
yeah,
much easier. Yeah. That actually happened to me the other night. Like when I went downstairs, like, yes, I had been sick all morning. Yes, I had only eaten maybe I had a cup of noodles and a Gatorade that day. That's all I ate. And I went downstairs and I trained anyways. And like I was blaming that, and I was blaming that I was sick, and that the weights were feeling heavy, and they probably would have felt heavy regardless of the environment. But like, who's
yeah,
to say that if I actually went to the gym and had some people around me that like they might
yeah,
have felt like it would have felt a little different, perhaps.
yeah,
I don't know because I didn't actually do that, but it's interesting to think about. And I'm always fascinated by how much the environment influences your performance and just
yeah,
like psychological arousal, things like that. Like you just amp yourself up a little bit. Like personally, it's like, and it's wild for me to have the velocity device because I notice the craziest shit. Like sometimes I'll be in the gym and I'll just be like, you're right, like I'm by myself or there's only a couple
yeah,
people, energy's low, and I'm like, and the bar's just moving slow, and I'm like, dude, the bar shouldn't. I'm like talking to myself, like, dude, like stop being a fucking bitch, like
yeah,
get up
yeah,
that bar and move it like you mean it, and then it's like the velocity shoots up, and it's
yeah,
like,
yeah. And I think velocity is a great tool for that. I think there's also a lot of value for people who train by themselves and recording their lifts as well, because that kind of checks them on like, oh, that rep felt really hard, and then they can look back on the video and see it fucking went up super easy.
yep.
But
And then if you have
actually,
the velocity data to corroborate that too, and it's
yeah,
and it works the other way too. When like the performance isn't there, it's much harder to convince yourself, like just on a pure RPE basis, like where you could say, man, I know if I just hit it with a little more intent, that if
yeah,
I add 5 or 10 kilos and just a little more intent, a little more aggression, like I'll move it at the prescribed
yeah,
RPE it's supposed to, right? Whereas like the velocity will just kind of be like, not today, brother. And I'm like,
mm-hmm,
all right, and I have so much more like sustainable training now.
yeah,
It's like I'm not constantly overreaching because I'm convincing myself in my rest period that I can do another 10 kilos.
mm-hmm,
You know,
yeah.
that's what I really
Actually,
like about the velocity is like I just focus on the values much more than the actual weight on the bar now.
yeah, yeah. Um, Something I'd actually be interested to get your take on that I've started doing, and I've seen pretty good responses from it with clients so far. So actually, I can't take credit for this idea. It's a guy that I trained, brought it up, and it made a lot of sense to me. So I had been using pretty much just exclusively reps in reserve with people as a gauge for intensity. And most people use RPE in the same way, where it's basically the reverse, where if you've got an 8 RPE, that means you've got 2 reps in the tank. But something that this guy that I was training said to me that I'd never thought about before was that, well, like reps in reserve, I think I was having to do chin-ups. And the way like chin-ups, like unless you're someone who can do fucking 20 of them, let's say you can do 7 or 8 in a row, the difference between doing 2 chin-ups and doing 4 is huge in terms of how hard it feels in a set. And I was saying, every set, I want you to have 2 reps in the tank, or relay to me how many you think you had.
Mhm.
And he was saying like I could do 2 more, but like it would be really fucking hard. And he was basically bringing up the point that like the problem with reps in reserve is that it doesn't take the intensity or the load that you're using into account. So for example, like if you're lifting 90% of your 1 rep max and you have 1 rep in the tank, is that the same as doing a 15 rep max and having 1 rep in the tank in terms of like how challenging that feels? Because it's a different percentage of the max number of reps that you can do at that weight, right? You're not going to be at the
Oh, yeah.
exact same percentage of your actual max effort if you're at 14 out of 15 total reps versus 1 out of 2 total
Oh
reps,
yeah.
you know?
We're talking like 65% versus like
Totally. So then
90.
he said like, I kind of like the idea of adding an RPE in there because he had used RPE before from a running standpoint, and obviously the way they use it in running is in terms of like actual challenge, like 10 being I'm gonna die, this is the most that I could possibly do, and 0 is I'm sitting on the couch.
Mhm.
So I've started doing that with people now, with online clients, where I'll assign them not on every exercise. I've kind of found that some exercises almost lend themselves better to just using that RPE approach, and some basically the exercises that people wimp out on and don't like taking close to failure, I find reps in reserve are great for those. And then the ones that people, and it might be an individual thing, maybe have a tendency to go too far on, RPE, I've found with that kind of like 10 scale difficulty thing
Mhm.
has worked really well. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Have you noticed that as a limitation with reps in reserve at all?
Um, so my thoughts on this are that people tend to either conceptualize them differently, or one just seems to make more sense to them than the other. And
Mm,
I'm just happy to let them use whichever scale they'd like to use, because
yeah.
I'd use them interchangeably. Like I just tend to think that the RIR scale is an inverted version of the RPE
Yeah. And
scale.
that's
It's
how I
like
would have
in
always
the
used it.
literature, like if you actually read the literature on, like that Zoros and Helms did validating the RPE scale, it was
Mm-hmm.
RPE by RIR.
Yeah.
So like that's just the way that I tend to think about it, is like, 1 rep in reserve is RP9, 2 reps in reserve is RP8, all the way down.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had some people that just seem to like they can't like grasp that for some reason. So it's like, or maybe
Yeah.
it's just overwhelming. Like the thought of like using 2 scales, it is kind of silly. I
Yeah.
know like you and I can probably conceptualize that very easily, but like if you want to use reps in reserve and you feel like that's a better um estimator of your performance, or if you want to use
Mm-hmm.
RP, like either way, I just tend to think they're kind of the same thing. Like there's still a subjective rating of proximity to failure, or
Yeah.
like of how hard you're working, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe some people think of it more in terms of like how hard am I working on a 1 to 10 scale versus like how far from failure am I? Because I tend to think
Yeah.
of it either way as proximity to failure.
I
Because
guess
I'm using it.
where I'm coming from with it is that like there'd be times where it, depending on the exercise, like deadlifts, for example, there could be times where like technically, and I can see it from like looking at a video, I probably have about 3 or 4 reps in reserve on a
Mhm.
deadlift. But in terms of how hard it actually feels like I'm working relative to like the hardest I can push on a set and the most effort I can exert, it feels like an 8 or an 8.5 out of 10, if you know what I mean. Like if I
Fair enough.
pushed those extra 4 reps, I would be fucking absolutely flattened, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I have this argument with my buddies at the gym all the time about like the 0.5 increments, right? Like saying like I always joke that like if you call like if you call a set a 9.5 RPE, it's like just call it a max, man. You want to just
There's
like
more
have
there.
this like inkling in the back of your mind, like, no, I could add 5 pounds to that
Yeah.
lift, do it again, or I could have, you know what I mean? It's like, and are we kind of splitting hairs at that point anyways? Like I typically give like ranges of RPE. Like if I want you to hit
Mm-hmm.
like say a squat single, like I rarely put 1 at 8. Like I'll put like 1 at
Yeah,
7,
same.
because I just
Yeah.
don't want you to think that hard. And I just don't
Mm-hmm.
think it matters, especially in the long term. Like what's the fatigue cost difference between a 7 and an 8 RPE single? Like that's non-existent. How would
Yeah,
you
that's
measure that? Oh my God, I actually, not to like go off on a tangent, but I actually saw something the other day about like measuring like saliva for what was it?
recovery.
Yeah, like to
Oh
see it, to
God.
test readiness.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine
Fucking
waking up
hell.
and
Come
testing your
on.
saliva for like certain biomarkers to see if you're like prepared to train today. Like that shit is just wild to me.
But like
Uh,
Angus Bradley made a really good post about that
I saw.
in the last few weeks about like the whole whoop band thing. It's like
Oh,
I just don't like you're gonna hopefully train anyway. Like I would hope that you're not gonna just not go in and train just because you got a fucking number on
yeah,
some device that hasn't been properly validated for that.
yeah,
And so, like, if you're going to go in and train anyway, why don't you just see how it feels and warm up and then adjust the weights accordingly? I just
yeah.
don't
Right.
see what extra value having all of this extra data is bringing to us, you know?
I'm just gonna skip the day because my whoop strap told me I should. It's
Yeah,
like, no,
and
you
plus,
just go in and like just do what you can do for the day, you know?
yeah, and going back to what you were saying about the impact that like the psychology of your expectations and whatever have on you,
Oh, that's huge.
even if we assume, like, let's say we assume that maybe there's 1% of an improvement in your training optimality to be gained by like honing in on all those little details of a saliva test and like a counter movement jumper and RSI and your
Yeah.
whoop band. What percentage of the rest of your training is being fucked up by thinking so much about that stuff and hyper fixating on how under recovered you are, you know?
Probably a very large proportion.
Yeah, because people
I
just
would
get
just
into
assume that.
their
Yeah.
heads.
Yeah. And to go back to like why I just give RP ranges for the most part.
Mhm.
Unless I want you to take it a little heavier than an 8. I'm probably not gonna write 9, 10, but I might write like
Yeah.
8, 10 or something, you know. But I just know that hitting that number perfectly on the head, even with velocity, is nearly impossible. Like
Mhm.
I even know like I use velocity ranges because I just know that like even if I have this like model,
Mhm.
all this neat model that says my RP8 single moves at 0.32 meters per second. You know how hard
Yeah.
it is to actually hit that single around
Yeah.
90% at 0.2. Like you might hit it at 0.33 or 0.30
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, so it's like you just have to go in with like the mindset of like, is this good enough for today? You
Mhm.
know, am I working hard enough? You know, am I close enough to fail or whatever the based on the prescription is?
Yeah.
But I don't tend to think like overthinking the proximity to failure or the effort is super helpful in the long term. You know what I mean? It's like just
Yeah.
show up, do your training. It's cool to have like the velocity or use the RP or use whatever, little tools that you have to help you, guide the process along, but like don't
Yeah.
hyperfix it stuff, which is,
Y-
I mean, that's just my,
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many people that I know and I've coached, and they're usually it's usually most dangerous, I think, for the beginners who
oh, yeah.
haven't even established the habit of going in and training hard a few times a week and are getting caught up in the weeds of like, how do I optimize my recovery? How do I get organic meat into my diet? How do I, you know,
Hit your protein and go to
ice
the gym.
baths and foam rolling? And it's like, man, you're not even doing the stuff that's going to make up 80% of
You're
your
not even
gains yet.
doing the bare minimum.
Yeah.
You're
You know,
literally not
it's
even doing the bare minimum. Like, come on, like let's hit those markers first, and then we can talk about a little more optimization stuff.
yeah, the biohacking thing just
Oh,
it
God. I know
really,
you've been posting about that a lot lately,
yeah,
which
it's great for
those people
engagement,
drive me
honestly.
insane too, man. Trust me, and like it's just wild because I had so I keep in touch with a few of my old clients from when I was doing like Gen Pop personal training in
Hmm.
person. And one reached out to me last week to wish me a happy birthday. And he's funny. He lives in Colombia now.
Oh, your birthday's pretty close to mine. It was mine yesterday.
Oh, happy belated, man.
And to
Um,
you.
thank you. And he reached out to me and sent me a Huberman post. And he was like, happy
Mhm.
birthday, man. Like, and he doesn't like follow me like that. Like he doesn't have an
Oh, he
Instagram. So
wasn't sending this to you ironically. He was
no,
like,
so this was through Facebook. This is through
yeah,
Facebook. And he was like, hey, you like, have you ever heard of this dude? Like, he's great. Like, and
yeah.
it's funny because knowing about like my former client, like he's such an optimization bro. Like he
Oh,
would do
okay, yeah.
all of the things that
Hmm.
he tells him. Like he probably does a lot of these biohacking things. And
Hmm.
like I know that people will do them and then like it's almost like this retrospective like confirmation bias where they're like, well, I feel so much better now. And it's like, dude, you literally feel
Yeah.
the same as you like. I would just guarantee that you just feel the same. It's just, I
Hmm.
don't know, like your perception or something is like driving this thought process that you have improved something or other, but it's like you haven't, it's like
Yeah,
I don't know.
I also have a theory that like these guys get people into like a wellness buzz mindset. And so even though they're harping on loads about like make sure first thing when you get up in the morning you tan your butthole and get
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
fucking coffee enema in or whatever.
Yanni.
I feel like people, because they're in that like super healthy mindset, just like subconsciously start eating a little bit more fruits and vegetables and walking a bit more,
Yeah.
but they attribute all of that I'm feeling better stuff to the
That's
crazy shit that hooked them in
That's
initially,
exactly what it's at. Yes. It's
Yeah.
like people who do like the keto diet, right? And they'll
Yeah.
see like improvements in their like blood markers or something. And it's like
Hmm.
that would have happened if you did any diet,
Yeah.
right? Because like you lost weight, you started eating more vegetables,
Hmm.
and you cut out a lot of probably like the highly processed sugary stuff that you eat, and you saw some improvements in your health. Like congratulations, but it doesn't mean that the diet,
Yeah.
the specific diet that you did is like uniquely beneficial. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The psychology of that for why people fight back against that
Oh,
speculation is really
tribalism is
interesting.
crazy, dude. Like people will just like attach themselves
But
to these ideas.
I wonder if it's because maybe that like if they accepted that it was just basic stuff that they could have done any which way without following this specific method, they would then have to accept that they could have actually done all that stuff and gotten the improvements years ago if they would have just focused on it, you know?
Just admit that you were wrong
Yeah.
and adjust course for no way, man. We can't
Is it
do that.
like that's kind of like that sunken cost fallacy thing? Like
Yeah.
I need to believe that all of the stupid shit that I was doing before was just, leading me down the path to eventually finding Huberman or Dr. Rhonda Patrick or somebody, but
Oh,
really you just kind of found somebody who you were engaged with enough to actually start taking some amount of health advice that was just somewhere in the right direction enough that you actually started fucking
you took it
exercising and eating
seriously enough that
vegetables.
it actually did something. And
Yeah.
then attribute that to like the specific thing or the
Hmm.
person or the method or whatever. Yeah.
And I think that works in lots of different domains. Like
Oh, for sure.
I've started growing my business a lot more recently, and I think a lot of it is because for years I I associated anything to do with like sales or marketing or anything like that with like just these really seedy seeming guys on social media who'd be like some guy standing on a yacht he probably doesn't even own talking rubbish. But they actually probably had some
Jordan
advice that
Belfort types.
would have pushed me somewhere in the right direction because I was doing no business stuff whatsoever. And then in the last while, I've actually found some people who I believe have better information, but the honest truth is I just resonate with them more and I'm willing to implement some of the stuff that I've seen them sharing. And it actually just got me started doing some amount of businessy stuff every week.
Yeah. That's something I certainly struggle with too, because I see it literally the same exact way.
Yeah.
It's like, and sometimes I see, good coaches out there like doing respectable marketing. And I still
Hmm.
kind of have this feeling in the
Yeah.
back of my gut that I'm like, oh, that's,
Yeah.
but then I don't do any marketing and I don't do
Yeah.
any business. And so like that ends up hurting me in the long run. And
Hmm.
it's like, man, you need to find a way that you can be, you can sell yourself and you can, but do it like in a respectable way that isn't,
Well, the meme page is a good
filthy.
conduit for that because I'm sure a lot of people get sucked in and see your memes and then they say, oh, this guy does coaching as well, then.
It doesn't work out as well as you think it would, or as well as I'd like it to. I think being as
Interesting, because
confident,
it doesn't for me, but it's hard
I
for
just
me to
feel like being as
speculate for people with bigger followings because I've
I
only
feel
got like 5,000 people.
fair. I feel like I don't know. I sort of feel like I have created too much controversy, or I'm like, people are unsure of me at this point. Like they're like, is he gonna make fun of me because I want a foam roll, or like, and he's kind of
You
being
think?
aggressive and like, I don't know, man. It's like
To be honest, I think a lot of the stuff
I
with
come off a little like standoffish and like don't fucking talk to me.
I
And I don't
actually
want
I don't think that that's true or 100% fair because I think it's more about. So something I've started trying to do more with my page, or will be making more of a concerted effort to do, is to actually insert myself into it more. And I think I've seen you do that a little bit more because for years I actually didn't know who you were at all. I think I started following your page during lockdown, and you were like anonymous for a while, right?
not
Um,
not intentionally, just I like when I started it, it was just like
you were just doing memes for fun, and it
just
just kind of
memes for
grew.
fun. Yeah, and then
Yeah,
it kind of blew up and it was like It
Yeah.
wasn't like intentionally anonymous. It was
Mhm.
just like I had the Dr. Evil profile photo. It's always been there, and
Yeah.
I didn't post anything but memes, you know. So it was
Yeah. Yeah.
like, and then it
So
was kind of fun to play the mysterious game for a little while.
yeah, I think I remember you saying this last time. Weren't people like speculating that it was
Yeah, that was
like,
like Jordan Feigenbaum from BBM, and like
yeah,
yeah, people were they thought I was like, which probably boosted my ego a little too much, you know.
yeah. It
I
would be
probably
hard
wasn't
then to go from that to then having to reveal that you're not Jordan
like,
Feigenbaum or
no, I'm
Greg
not.
Nuckols
Yeah,
or
right.
something.
It's like, well, I got to bring myself
Yeah.
down so many pegs. You know what I mean?
But I
Uh,
think now this is just my take on it, but because I struggle with this as well. I don't get clients from the meme page at all. I get clients from referrals from the people that I train or the email subscriber list that I have or things like that. My take on it is, and I kind of got this sense because I listened to a podcast with a guy who runs one of the really big meme pages that's kind of like powerlifting centric memes. And I think he got asked by the presenters about this himself. And he didn't like fully go into it, but it sounded like he doesn't really get any clients at all from the meme page. And this guy has like tens and tens of thousands of people following him. And I think the problem with the memes, what I found anyway, is that if all I posted was memes and I would put up anything that wasn't a meme, I would immediately lose like a certain amount of followers. Not a lot, but like maybe say like 50 or something like that.
they're like, I'm not here
Um
for that.
yeah, exactly. So I think the problem is that when you have a meme page and somebody comes on to that, so they usually the way they find it is somebody sends them a funny meme. They're like, "Hey, that was pretty good. I wonder if there's any other good memes on there." So they go in, and then what they see at first glance is going to be basically what they make their decision on in terms of if they're going to hit follow or not. And so when they look at the page and all they see is memes, their expectation is, I'm going to follow this because I want to see more funny memes. But if they come onto the page and they see like some training advice and something about the person who runs the page as like a coach or who they are as a person or whatever, now they have a different decision to make. Like, oh, am I going to follow this person for training content and a bit of memes or just for memes? Because I noticed like, do you know Keir Wenham Flat? He was rugby strength coach before.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'd really recommend following him. He's great and he's got really good business advice as well. But he kind of like built his platform as like a strength and conditioning coach. But he used memes to build a huge amount of his Instagram following. But like people love his memes, but the memes are only like one part of his page, and the memes are kind of like the conduit towards showing people like the value stuff of like, here's how I can actually help you. You know, he runs this thing called Strength Coach Network, which is a really cool idea actually. It's like a strength and conditioning networking, but also like value based site where, you know,
Okay.
really good coaches come on and do like video lectures or they do podcasts and things like that. They'll have like, you know, a whole lecture from someone who's like an expert in like hamstring injuries in rugby or
Oh,
something
cool.
like that.
That's awesome.
But I think I might be wrong because I haven't pulled this off yet, but like that's something that I'm going to be doing a lot more with my meme page, is kind of trying to let the people who just want memes, like if they don't want to follow, that's fine. But you know, I don't want to be a professional memer. And it takes
Yeah.
more time than people realize to like come up with the meme that's not going to be shit. Even though like the little
Not going to
fucking
trigger
memetic thing
anybody.
is very, you know, very easy. You can put together a great meme in 5 minutes, but like sometimes you need to actually think about like, does this actually, you know, work the way that I think it does in my head, you know? I'm sure we
Yeah.
both put up things before where like it didn't come out
This
the way that you
morning
thought it
just
was.
happened to me this morning, man.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So no one's gonna see this. So I used to no, or no one's gonna see this that I would be talking about here. So I used to work for this gym, and it was the way it was. So he would buy, well, not buy, but he had, regular standard 45-pound, 20 kg bars, and then he had
Mm-hmm.
Bella bars, and that's fine, right? But he would always just assume all
Oh,
the
I did
women.
see this. Sorry. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
about like
So he
women
would just
using
always
Bella
assume
road
all the
bars.
women would need a Bella bar, right? So like we did small group training and he would always set up.
What is a Bella bar? Sorry, is it just a
It's
15 kilo
it's a,
weightlifting bar? Or
yeah, yeah.
okay,
It's a women's bar.
okay,
Which is fine if you prefer a smaller bar, a smaller diameter, you're an Olympic weightlifter.
mm-hmm.
My gripe with it was like he would always set up the like stations, right? Like you would have like
Mm-hmm.
your own station. And if it was a woman client coming in, he would put the Bella bar there,
Okay,
regardless of if they had a
strength
preference.
level.
It was
Yeah.
just, well, it's a woman, they get the Bella bar.
Okay.
And so I still follow the page and I was watching the story and I see one of the clients who I actually used to work with, using the Bella bar. And it's not like it's a bad thing, but I was just like, man, like, I just thought of the concept of it, like in him just like putting the Bella bar there and like, no, and it was like, so I made the stupid meme, like, just implying that like, you don't have to assume that a woman needs to use a woman's bar, right? Like if they can just use the standard bar, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And I got people jump down my throat over it,
Oh, really?
like, yeah, because they don't have the context that I had. Yeah. They started like giving me all these weightlifting examples. I'm like, when have I ever talked about only lifting on this page ever?
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
I feel like there's like this handful of people on my page that like, I feel like they just like idle in the background and they just like wait for me to post something
Yeah.
wants.
Oh,
So
it's
they can
funny.
so they
Like
can be like, haha.
The Joe Rogan things that I put up there, like some of the people
Yeah, like
I
they're like such haters that that's the only reason they follow you, and they're just waiting for you to
But this
post
is what
something
I found so funny.
complain
Yeah,
about.
like there was people who were going crazy, and then I looked at their profile and it said that they followed me. And like I wanted like I really had to like bite
You
my
almost want to
tongue,
DM them
and
and be like, bro, what's up with you?
I just had to really, because something I am quite happy about that I've managed to do since starting doing the memes and stuff like that, and especially like some of the spicier ones, which it seems to be like anything to do with Joe Rogan basically just
Oh my
explodes.
God.
God, like some people just have that guy's dick so far down their throat, it's crazy. But the thing that I've really had to work on is not jumping into the comments and not getting
Oh my
kind of
God.
like being able to gauge like what's going to be an argument in bad faith that's just a waste of time, and what's like something that's worth letting people see that I actually do care about, like giving a nuanced take. Like if somebody leaves a comment being like, oh, I think this is unfair because of this reason or whatever, I don't want to just leave that there and let people think that I don't care about that sort of stuff. But when somebody comes in being like, oh, you think because you've got a master's degree that you're qualified to critique literal PhDs, and it's just like I'm not going to get into this with somebody who's going to move the goalposts all the time, and
that's clearly in bad faith. Like
they're just
insulting you.
Yeah, there's no winners there, and all that's going to happen is I'm going to get annoyed, and it's a waste of time, really. But sorry, I can't even remember how I got onto that. What were you talking about specifically?
It was about my meme from this
Oh
morning.
yeah, like I'm sure you do have people who like you would think that they hate you, but they follow your page because they're addicted to arguing with people on the internet, and they're just waiting for a chance for you to post something.
Yeah. They're addicted to arguing with people. No, that's good. Because like I assume that like, oh, they're just a hater, but I guess that makes them a hater. I just want to sit there and argue, but yeah, I deal with that all the time, and I've gotten better, but there's times where like I kind of like get annoyed and I get a little triggered. We all get a little triggered, and it's okay.
We all get triggered over stuff. I've gotten hella triggered before over things.
And sometimes I engage. Usually I'm pretty good about it.
Yeah.
Usually I can like engage in a sarcastic way where it's like, I'm just not going to make this, I'm not going to make a serious thing about this. And like, I kind of like make a joke of it, especially if it's like some insulting thing. I either will just plain out ignore it, or like if I see like an opening where I can like be funny here and like kind of downplay the comment, I'll try that. But like sometimes I see the shit and I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with you people?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
you know what works really well? Two things I found work really well. The first one is if you actually thank them, because regardless of how annoying their comment is, and as far as the algorithm's concerned, it's actually helping our posts when the more that they comment, the more that it gets pushed into people's news feeds.
Yeah.
So they don't like that because they don't like to think that they're helping us. And the second thing that they really don't like is when you actually meme them then. Now, I don't do this too much. I did it
I
when
do
I
that too.
first started making memes because I was so fresh to it. But sometimes I've kind of felt like it kind of borders on bullying. But if it's some guy with
Definitely do
a
it in bad.
fucking, yeah, yeah. But if it's with some guy who's like acting internet hard man gladiator in the comments and he's got an anonymous profile with no followers and throwing out all these really nasty things that I know they'd never have the balls to say in person, then I think it's pretty fair to meme that person and shame them a little bit.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I ran into that that very situation the other night. There was this dude who had like, 3 followers, private account, no profile photo, and he knew
Mm-hmm.
my name.
They're so
He
brave.
was
They're
in
so
my
brave.
DMs and he was calling me Mark Doherty and he was calling me like he was calling me a groomer and like all this
Jesus
stupid
Christ.
political shit. Yeah. Um, and people are just like, so I kind of brought it on myself, if I'm being perfectly honest. Someone shared there was some page reviewed some paper that looked at trans athletes.
Okay.
And now I don't really know enough about this science to really comment on it, but
Mhm.
I just don't really like the anti-trans rhetoric because
Well, a lot of it is definitely like,
it's just hardcore right-wing bro bullshit. And it's like,
yeah,
I
I
just don't
just
like it. And I know people who are trans. There's people that train at my gym who are trans and they're cool fucking people,
mhm,
like, do I understand that? No. But like, am I going to respect them and let them live their lives and not look down upon them? Absolutely. Am I going to encourage them to train and get stronger and like come to the
mhm,
gym and do their thing? Fuck yes, I am. And it just like really irks me when I see like other people come in and just like start bashing these people. It's like,
yeah.
how does that affect your life? Like, I understand that there's like this big argument in sport, and I'm not trying to get into all that. Um, but like, they're human beings, man.
Yeah.
Like, so like my dumbass with these beliefs goes into this comment section.
Always goes well. The trans
Always
arguments
goes
on the
well.
internet
And I
always
just
go
like, I
well.
don't know. I just kind of fired back a few stupid things at people. Like I shouldn't have done that. And then I had this kid in my DM going, imagine being Mark Doherty. You're like this, you're a fucking groomer, and it's like, buddy, how my name? And like, I guarantee you wouldn't say, like, first of all, because if you're some hardcore right wing lifting bro, you won't have a
Mhm.
private account. You're
Yeah.
gonna show how fucking manly you are.
Yeah.
That's a fact. So I know already that you're probably some little fucking scrub in your mom's basement because you're
Mhm.
hiding behind a private account. So don't start acting like a fucking tough guy. Like you're gonna like if we ever came face to face, you're gonna call me a groomer because I'd probably slap the fucking shit out of you. And like, let's just not go there. And like, I have a
Mhm.
short fuse and I have a little bit of a temper, and like that shit just bothers the fuck out of me. And like, I blocked him because you could already see me like already getting hot thinking about it. So I'm like, dude, like just like why do you people even exist? Like it just really fucking bothers me. I don't
Well,
know.
liberal use of the block button is a great feature of
Oh
social media apps, you know.
no.
And I think
I need to
like
use it
on
even more liberally than I already do.
yeah, I think that the big giveaway that those people are arguing about topics like that in bad faith is that you clearly know they've never given a shit about the equality of the way that women's sports is structured up until now, or about women's sports in general.
Yeah,
And as
it's like
soon as
now you
the
care. Now you
yeah,
care.
now
Come
you've
on.
become the advocate for women's sports and
Yeah.
making sure that they're
Full
getting a
fucking
fair
shit.
shake,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, exactly. Like that's
So
my biggest
there are
gripe.
people out there who need to have that discussion and figure out how it's all going to work, but it's
Yeah.
not me, and I
Not
I
me.
don't. Yeah, it's not for me to decide or have like a major voice in the conversation about. They'll figure out something eventually, but yeah, there's just so many of these people. It's just it's like the way people you see people act like this even if you're driving, people have a totally different way and persona that they'll adopt with how they treat other people when you're in a car and they get road rage, because it's like there's this degree of an anonymity in your own little bubble and you're not really interacting with somebody, and it's like sites like, or apps like Instagram and Twitter are like an amplification of that, where you could be
Oh,
totally removed from ever having to have any accountability for what you say to people.
yep.
And I just assume that the people who spit the most vitriol must just have fucking nothing going on in their lives.
I know. Like, how can you just be that hateful? Like,
Yeah.
it's hard for me to really like wrap my head around like someone just like being that way, like they just exist to spit vitriol on the internet. Like, it's like you literally have a troll account just to do this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how sad and pathetic are you? Like, it's just wild to me.
I think it's one of the really hard things about navigating social media as like a business, or using it for business, like just not getting sucked into like the day-to-day little petty squabbles that people
Yep.
try to have about things. It's very hard to go on there and just like do what you need to do, put up your post or whatever, or DM the person that you need to, and avoid all of the crazy shit that goes on there.
Oh yeah. Plus, I always feel like for me personally, it's not really my style to like hold my tongue about stuff that I believe in or I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
It's something that's certainly got me in trouble before. Um, there was
But I mean, like,
I
it's your brand to a certain extent, in that, like,
yeah,
I'm
and
sure
it's
that's
but
why
how
a
much does
huge
that how much does
percentage
that
of
hurt me?
people.
It's like the way I kind of look at it is like, does it hurt me or does it actually bring people into the fold that I would rather have in my circle? You
I
know what
mean,
I mean?
I would go towards the latter there, because the thing is, like, on the internet, especially in the fitness space, it's so saturated and so noisy that
Mhm.
if you don't very clearly stand for a set of specific things, then you just get lost in the sea of stuff. And if you just kind of have moderate takes on everything, you're going to get beaten by people who have phenomenal funding for production quality and stuff like that. Like, I wish that I could just go on social media and just put up good solid information about like why you should be doing resistance training, and why you should be doing squats, and you should eat a little bit of protein. But the problem is that, like, there's already thousands of people who are doing that.
Yeah.
And I feel like the stuff that you make memes about, or that I make memes about, even though there's already like a kind of growing number of people talking about that in the space, it's still realistically very niche for people to
Yeah.
say bash the functional training stuff, or call out the Andrew Hubermans of the world for talking like absolute bullshit. It's easy to forget that we live in a bubble where like that's
Yeah.
just the norm. Like that
Yep.
guy who messaged you, it's just like, this guy's an expert. Why aren't you following them? You're a personal trainer. You're a coach. You know?
Literally. Yep.
So like when I went onto your page for the first time, I was actually like blown away, because there wasn't anybody who was taking a hard enough stance against that stuff. There was a lot of, I feel like in some ways, the really big pages in the evidence-based space are kind of handicapped by that, because they've gotten big enough that maybe they feel like they don't want to kind of be too outspoken and piss people off about stuff that maybe they'd be happy enough to talk about how stupid some guy is and how ridiculous the things they're posting are in private, but they don't want to get sucked into that rhetoric online, you know?
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And to be honest, like even myself, I've been trying to get away with that because I started that way and it was great. I don't know, like I don't really want to deal with it anymore either, to be honest. I'm trying to find some balance though. Like I don't want to just be another fitness page on the internet.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to come across as like this harsh person who's like constantly calling people stupid either, because I don't think that
Yeah.
makes me good.
I think there's definitely a balance that can be struck.
Yeah.
And I've definitely overstepped the mark a good few times of going after the person too much as opposed to the idea. I
Yep.
do think that for some really bad ideas, though, you do have to mention the person. And the reason why is not only because they don't deserve to just like never get critiqued, but I wonder if you've noticed this as well, that like people really struggle to grasp like how to filter information until they're given a real world example. So like I can't count the amount of times that I've had somebody following me, agreeing with all the stuff that I'm posting, and then send me a guy's page being like, you got to be following this guy. He's got such good information. Or like, what do you think about this take? And it'd be something absolutely batshit insane that like just has no basis in any logic or evidence. And I'm like, only last week you were telling me how great it was to be like evidence based and like how you should be on the lookout for people who are coming with these like real black and white narratives on things. Like this guy is doing exactly this. And he's like, no, this guy's different, you know? And it's like people's brains just shut off when somebody seems charismatic enough. And it's like, until you really address, no, like this exact person is doing exactly what I'm talking about, it's very hard to get through to some people, because like that's kind of like the Joe Rogan pushback thing that I get. I lose followers every time that I post about him, and I'm always amazed, and I'm like, why were you guys following me to begin with? Why would you have possibly thought that I would endorse any of the people who go on the Joe Rogan podcast?
Yeah. And then if I challenge any of the things that they say, you unfollow me immediately. Like that's so odd to me. It's like, did you take any of the things that I was saying seriously at all? Like up until this point, for you to get that triggered and unfollow me over, kind of challenging a Joe Rogan take, like that's strange.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, like people just don't understand how the principles of knowledge acquisition work in real life until they get given like a proper example, Yeah.
Well, like a good example yesterday is I was getting some questions about VBT on my story. It was on my personal account. And someone asked me, can you just starting strength the VBT velocity loss stuff for me? Like put it in a neat package, like day 1, do this, day 2, do this, day 3, do this, day 4, do this. Yeah. And I was like, I've just like thoroughly explained a lot of this stuff, more in principle, more in concept, but like you should be able to take that and just think, oh, I can apply that this way.
Yeah.
Because like when I take in information, like that's how I think of it. I'm not like, oh, I need the specific method. Like I did, Mike Tashir did a webinar on emerging strategies last week that I took. And
I saw you post about that. Yeah. And I really liked his stuff.
It was really great. So it was like emerging strategies in 5 easy steps. And it was just the very basic principles. And someone who was in the, attended the webinar with me, DM me after, and they were like, I'm having a lot of trouble like applying like this specific thing that he said to apply. And I'm like, I don't really think you have to do it in the specific manner that he said. It's like, just take the idea, the concept, the principle of it, and apply it in a whatever way you want to. It's like, you don't have to do the highly specific things or like his method of it, right? But you can take the concept and apply it in your own way. It's like, I don't know, like that's kind of how my brain works. So when I take in information, it's like, how can I apply this? Like, how can I take in training information that I didn't previously understand and then formulate it in my own way? It's like, if you could read like any of the like Science and Practice of Strength Training, right? And they have like, or
God help you if you try to read that fucking book.
Or like Tudor Bumpus periodization. You could use any example, right? That has like program samples in it.
Yeah.
And it's like, here's the principles, here's the program sample, and people will try to run like this block periodization from the book. And it's like, that's not, I never read those books and was like, I'm going to do this exact program. I was like, these are great. Now I understand the principles. Let me go formulate my own programming.
Yeah.
Like that's always been my thought process. Like when I first started, it's a little different. Yeah. You follow the things, but it's more, I feel it's more so about learning the rules. Like when you learn the rules, you know how to break them. Right? Yeah. So you have to follow the specific program in the book. You just need to understand the principles and or understand the rules rather. And then you could just formulate them and break the rules here and there, however you see fit. I've kind of, what was to circle back? What the hell were we talking about?
I think that we were talking about something to do. Oh, we were talking about just how people will, like say for instance, like the messages like you put on your page.
Yeah.
Well, they kind of struggle. they struggle to apply the principles that you're talking about to a real life scenario and actually
until they
think
actually.
critically about something that they haven't been presented with before. Because I think when I first started coaching people, one thing that I really struggled with was kind of like allowing myself to put too much value in other people's bullshit kind of stories that they had made up about things. So like people love to think that they have really unique problems that kind of like bump the trends of like just like good basic program design. So like somebody will come in and make out that like they have this really unique joint pain or something like that that they've tried everything for, and like it just won't they won't think that they could just go lighter on an exercise and build up. Or like I'm trying to think of a good example. Like people will I had a guy one time who did a consult with me. This is a good example actually. And he just wanted me to go through his program with him. And I post a lot. Probably one of the biggest things that I probably post about when it comes to programming is simplicity.
Mhm.
And simplicity and having goals and making sure that the goals are prioritized within the program, because we both know you can't be great at everything at once.
Correct.
So he showed me his program, and I'm gonna say there was like 30 different exercises in the program, and he was deliberately trying to progressively overload all of them at once, all with the same amount of like importance. And there was this other crazy thing in there where like he was trying to do um like 2 extra days of like just doing shitloads of arms, like 10 sets of 10 on arms or something like that to bring his arms up. And I was trying to relay like this idea that you not only can you not get good at all this stuff at the same time, but you don't have to get good at everything all at once,
Yeah.
because realistically, you're still in like the beginner stages of training. If you just got good at a few real key things, all of this stuff would get touched on to a certain degree. And then if you get to the point where like you're kind of strong, kind of jacked, and you're like, oh, my arms are really underdeveloped, then yeah, you could just kind of focus on arm accessories for a while.
Yeah.
And he just couldn't register that like, no, but I want to work on all this stuff, and I want my front squat to go up and my back squat, and I want to work on getting my lunges up. And it just, you would think that the principle part of it would have sunk in, but people really struggle with applying principles to a real world scenario that they have to actually like critically think about.
Yep. No, excuse me. No, I totally agree with you. And I run into similar scenarios all the time. I actually got on a call last week with a friend who I don't care. I'm good friends with him, and I'll talk shit about him a little bit. I don't care, even if he listens to this. But he was struggling with some hip pain, and he writes his own programming and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
we did like a lot of the conjugate stuff together, and then we
Mm-hmm.
both got away from it. And he still struggles with some of the ideas, like he still not struggles, but more so like is inclined to use some of these methods rather
Sure.
than like the principles behind them. It's like, I have to do XYZ, and
Okay.
it's just like, and I was like, man, you actually don't have to do any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, well, I got to do like high bar wide stance squat to target my hips. And I was like, no.
Mm-hmm.
I said, if you want your hips to work a little more in the squat, just squat deeper. Just flex your hips
Yeah.
more, right? Like you don't have to like put your stance really wide and like sit back and do this hingy squat. Like
Yeah.
your adductors, your glutes, like they're all going to get worked as long as you just squat to depth. And I
Yeah.
said, put your feet wherever you feel comfortable. You don't have to have wide. You don't have to, just put them where you feel comfortable. Put the bar where it feels comfortable and just lift. And,
Mm-hmm.
he messaged me the next day and he's like, dude, lifting went great. Thank you so much. But I still saw some of that West Side bullshit in his program. And I'm like, come on, man. Like I told you to let that shit go. You know what I mean? And,
But
but
that's
yeah,
interesting, because I think that something that I wrestle with a lot is how much how much credence to give that whole kind of belief system aspect of training, and that like if somebody comes in and they want to do something that I don't think is a great way of going about things, but I know will be maybe 70-80% of the way there, would I be doing them a disservice if I get them not to do that and do something that they don't believe in as strongly? Or would it be better for me to just have them do the thing that they're really motivated about doing and try to bleed as much out of that as possible? Now, if I'm being totally honest, most of the time, like if they want to do something that's a radical departure from my coaching philosophy or like what I kind of advocate for, I'm
Mm-hmm.
probably just going to put my foot down and say, no, come on, this is dumb. But, you know, it's interesting. I think that's kind of like the next big frontier in terms of sports science is like figuring out how to manipulate that placebo effect in an ethical way that can really boost people's performance.
Yeah. I've softened my stance on that a lot over the years where like
Yeah.
when people would, when I had lifters who would like, can I try this? Can I try that? And if I didn't like it, no, like it's kind of almost my way or the highway. Like I'm coach,
Yeah.
I know best,
Yeah.
and then you start to realize that that's all bullshit,
Yeah.
and because I've worked with so many people who I've lost clients over that. Those are mistakes I've made as a coach in the past, trying to make people do, you can't wear your heels. You have to wear flats. You can't do this close stance. You have to do a wide stance. You
Yeah.
can't drive your knees forward. You have to sit your hips back. Things like that. Like I would say that shit all the time when I first started coaching powerlifting, especially.
Yeah.
And it's just now it's like, if I have a lifter that comes to me and they're like, hey, can we try this thing? I'm like, sure. As
Yeah.
long as, like you said, it's not so far off the reservation where you're like, yeah, we're not doing that. But it's
Yeah.
like, and for most of the time, it's like an accessory movement or like, I
Mm-hmm.
want to do an AMRAP with this weight and
Yeah.
like, who the fuck am I to say no?
Yeah.
I just say, okay, well, how can I manipulate the training volume and yada yada to sort of, and I don't love the word optimize, but like
Yeah.
optimize your cycle for the week where like I can.
Biohack is the word you're looking for.
But it's like, I am working with people who are I wouldn't not training at like a high level, but they're pushing themselves consistently. Like I don't have that issue where people are not pushing themselves. Like
Mm-hmm.
I oftentimes have to pull people a little back. And so like I'm more so like I am managing stress day to day,
Yeah.
week. Like that's more my job. So like how can I manipulate those variables in a way that allow you to like, okay, you want to push a fucking AMRAP on bench this week? Like, okay,
Yeah.
well, you drop the stress this day. You can push this day. I'm gonna drop the stress here.
Yeah.
Have at it. Because ultimately in the long term, it's
It
not going
evens
to take
out.
away from
Yeah.
anything. And it
Yeah.
might
You
help.
just, yeah, might
Who
help.
knows?
And
If they, it's like, and that was going to be my addition to that is like, if you truly believe that this is going to help you, maybe it does. And who am I to say that it won't?
yeah. And
So
especially
have
if
at it.
there's, yeah, I think especially if there is a plausible
Yes.
chance that it could help you towards your goal. I think it's different if somebody comes in and is like, um, I don't know, I want to deadlift triple body weight, but I only want to do squats. I don't want to train deadlifts. Well,
Yeah.
like, no, you're not going to placebo your way to a triple body weight deadlift by doing that. But
Yeah, definitely.
one thing that I definitely made me realize that I've also softened my stance on this over time is like a friend of mine who I met up with recently. Um, she had been doing personal training with a guy, or it was online coaching actually,
Mm-hmm.
and she wouldn't like be big into strength training. She was kind of doing it because she knew that it was good for her health, and um, she hurt her back deadlifting in one of the sessions anyway. And to you or me, knowing a lot more about the complexity of pain and how like deadlifts are fine basically, like it could happen on lots of different exercises and it was probably the load or maybe she was tired on the day, but to her it was a big deal, and she was really freaked out about how sore her back was for a few days, and I think it lasted for a while, and she was saying that she stopped training with the coach because basically she told him that she didn't want to do deadlifts anymore, and he just kept on reassuring her and like putting it back in the program,
Mhm.
and doing, smart stuff, and that he wasn't making it really heavy or whatever.
Fair.
But she just said, look, I just don't want to do deadlifts anymore. And he just kept on ignoring it, basically. And
Yeah, like
eventually she was like, I just stopped training with him because I would have been happy to stay with him, but he just wasn't listening to what I wanted. And I thought about it and I was like, damn, I was 100% that guy like 5 years ago, you know?
same. Yep.
And I thought about it and I was like, she doesn't need to do deadlifts. Like,
Nope.
I could have got her doing back raises or
Yeah, just
any
train the
other
muscles.
exercise that
Yeah.
trains her back that she wouldn't have associated with that fear, and she would have been absolutely fine,
Yep.
And there
Yep.
might have been a day where she got strong enough on those a year or 2 years later where she's like, fuck it, I want to try deadlifts again, But like, it's so hard, I think, when you first start to form like a really strong idea about like how you want people to be training, to detach yourself from that when somebody comes along and doesn't give a fuck about that, because why should they just want
Yes.
to get to their goal.
Yeah, especially if the training is not reflective of their goals at all, but like you
Yeah,
find ways to relate it.
yeah,
Like they just want to be stronger, so they have to do deadlifts.
yeah.
It's like they could literally do any exercise, especially if they're not
Hmm.
like they don't have a specific goal or they're not like a competitive lifter. It's like
Hmm.
you don't really have to do anything that you don't want to do. You don't have to
Yeah,
squat. You don't have to do bench press. Like you
yeah.
could do push-ups and lunges.
Hmm.
You could do step ups
Yeah,
and dumbbell and overhead press. Like you could do really anything you want to do, and it's gonna have an effect on your overall health in the long term. So like,
yeah,
who cares? That's kind of where I'm at with that stuff now, especially if you don't have any specific goals towards like, I want to improve my 1RM in this lift or a 5R or whatever. I want to prove
yeah,
my strength. Yeah. I mean, I think we've all made those mistakes.
yeah. It's so funny
uh,
because like you never really you never think it at the time. Obviously, you
oh
always you
no.
always assume you're doing the best job that
Well,
you
and they're
can
also
be.
paying you for your expertise, right? So like
Yeah.
your stance is that this is what I think is the best thing, the best course
Hmm.
of action.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's hard to really check yourself in those moments sometimes.
Yeah. And I
I mean,
think,
I even still find myself doing that sometimes now
yeah.
when, it's like, no, 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 shut up. Like be quiet back there, like just let them talk if they want to, let them
Yeah.
explore, like let them explore a little more. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, who the fuck am I to limit them and hold them back from things or tell them they can't do X, Y, or Z? It's like, let's try it and see what happens.
I
And
think
I've
the
honestly like
really,
my rapport with everybody has improved so much from like just softening my stance on like I don't want you to do what I don't want you to do to like let's
mhm.
try it.
Yeah.
You know,
I I think a huge thing that I did this year that really opened my eyes to that was I gave all of my clients like a New Year's goals sheet to set out.
nice.
And it was just a series of like basically why questions, just breaking down like what is it you really want to do? Why do you want to do that? What is that specifically going to look like? And what are the habits, etc., that are going to get us there? Because in the past, I would get very frustrated with people who, like, by my standards of what I hold myself to, weren't putting in a lot of effort. And I would think, well, like, what are you doing? Like, why won't you just, like, why would you show up to the gym one day a week and then disappear for 2 weeks and then come back? But then you like dig through like the why questions with them and find out that actually they don't really care about hitting like 1 rep max on their bench press or whatever. They just want to generally feel a little bit better. And they can kind of achieve that by not being like massively consistent with their training. They can come in once
Yep.
or twice a week and it's not a big deal to them. So I guess I had to reframe like what constitutes me doing a good job. And I think when you first start off coaching, you get caught up on the means by which you get to the end. And when you figure out like what the end really is for somebody, then there's loads of flexibility in how you get there. Because if somebody is like, I don't know, I just want to gain a little bit of muscle and feel a little bit stronger. And you're like, okay, what exercises do you enjoy? Are there exercises that would really motivate you to do that? and you find out that actually they'd much prefer push-ups to bench press. I'm like, fucking cool, we're going push-ups. That's
Yeah.
fine. And
Yeah.
at
'Cause
least then,
that's
if
gonna
you're,
keep them more engaged in the process and more likely
yeah,
to come back and keep
yeah,
doing it when they're like, oh, I have to do those squats today, or I have to do
mhm,
the bench press, or I have to do these deadlifts.
yeah,
It's like they're more timid coming in. They don't really want to be there. And it's like it's a force,
yeah, yeah,
it's just like, yeah, that's certainly not the way to go.
yeah. But yeah, so I think, yeah, you're right in that, like, that's a common thread with most people who become better coaches anyway, I think, is that they become less of a dictatorial role and more kind of like a
Yeah.
guide along the way to help you get there,
100%. Yeah, it's just I'm sitting here like kind of just thinking back on like my career, and it's like I remember being such a hardo, and I went through the whole functional training phase, and it was like,
Hmm.
man, and it's just crazy how much I've changed my perspective over the years, and like how much like better of a coach I am because of it all. It's like I'm happy that I went through all those experiences, and I was wrong
Yeah,
about so many things because I ultimately like self-corrected all that stuff. And it's like, and now I'm a better coach because of it. So, I mean, I think that it's like a rite of passage, right? You got to go through these failures in order to like, they're the opportunities for you to learn and improve yourself. So,
totally. Like, you can't make a better decision until you've made a worse one and kind of seen what the consequences of them
yep.
are. It's like, I remember when like, sometimes I catch myself being like, oh, if I would have just gone into doing personal training when I was like 18, fresh out of school, and started my business then, I'd be 10 years in or 11 years into that now. And like, think about how much further along I've been. But like, it's just such bullshit, because there's no way I could expect 18-year-old me who wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach to have the context to know to make that decision. And I remember, like, when I was
There's
doing
no
my
way for
first,
you to know then what you know now.
yeah, yeah. And I remember doing an internship. I had one of the guys on here on the podcast. I hadn't talked to him in like 7 or 8 years or something like that. And it was like one of the first internships I did in a CrossFit gym. And I remember telling them that I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach, and like aspirations, like go and work in the NFL or something, or with the Irish rugby team. And I could see them just like laughing, like, "Mm, okay, sounds cool," and
You're in for
they
a rude awakening, man.
they try to help me. They were like, look, it's not that easy. And even if you do get there, it probably isn't everything that you think it's going to be,
Definitely
both
not as glamorous as you think it is.
professionally, financially, all of the above, family
Yep.
commitments and everything going out the window. And, um, you know, there's nothing that really would have dissuaded me from that, because I just had to go away and just try it for myself and realize,
Yep.
okay, this isn't what I thought it was.
Yep. 100%, man. 100%. Oh, it's been a journey though. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. And um positively, but also kind of grim. I know that I will look back in like another 10 years or something like that, opinions I had on things or ways that I was coaching people, and think, ah, fuck, why was I doing that?
Yeah, I already know that's going to happen. I
Yeah.
kind of expect it, and it's almost welcoming at this point. It's
Hmm.
like just because I feel like I have such a different mindset on learning and being
Yeah.
wrong in general, where it was like before, or when I first started, rather, it was, I need to be the expert. I need to have the answers. I can't say I don't know X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
Then you just, over the years, you're like, oh yeah, I don't know about, I have to look into that. It's like,
Yeah.
you just become more comfortable with being wrong, and you realize that being wrong actually helps you learn. So you're like, okay, like I expect this to happen from time to time, and that's all right. And it keeps you more open-minded.
Yeah.
You're not, so you don't have such a hard stance on certain things. Um, I barely have a hard stance on anything these days for training. It's just like,
Well, it's so
uh,
hard to justify having one when you look at
yeah.
all the different things that
Oh
work,
my God. Yeah. Like even things like, foam rolling, or like, I
Yeah.
don't know, if you like your Theragun, like
Yeah.
have at it, man. Like, I don't know. I feel like 4 years ago, I was like, put the Theragun in your bag. I don't want to see
Yeah.
it again. Now it's like, I don't care, man. Oh,
Yeah.
you want to do bird dogs you want to do a little like non-specific warm up?
Mm-hmm.
Like just,
If
I don't know,
that's
things that I generally like will talk shit about on the internet. I'm trying to think of.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I think, when either of us talk shit on those things, it's because of the narratives that are attached to them.
oh, 100%.
Rarely do we see people talking about the wonders of foam rolling as like, a thing that could be equivocal to just like doing a basic warm up and not having all of the breaking up muscle adhesions and
Yeah,
knots and stuff attached to that.
yeah, 100%, 100%.
So yeah, it's all about the narratives. That's actually probably the biggest thing that I've learned over the last year or two, is that it's very hard to outright say that a lot of things don't work or are useless, but
Yeah,
there's a lot of narratives that get attached to tools that are inaccurate or not helpful.
yep, absolutely. Yeah, like that's kind of my perspective too. Like if the narrative is not harmful in any way, it doesn't have those like negative connotations where it's like, oh, you gotta, it's gonna break up this scar tissue, or if you don't do it, you're gonna get injured, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
Um, I'd rather hear like just an honest take, like, hey, you could do it if you like,
yeah,
it, it might make you feel better. Cool. If you like it, cool. But like, don't expect it to do all these magic physiological things that aren't happening,
yeah, yeah. Well, look, we've been going for a while, so probably a good
No, I don't
place
even think
to
we talked
wrap it
about
up
what
there.
we intended to talk about. Weren't we going to talk about the like pushing really hard and like, or like how taxing high level strength training is on your body or something like that? Isn't
Oh
that
yeah, well, we can touch on
plan?
that actually before we finish up. What was that about? Like whether or not it's like the injury risk and the trade offs and everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I think basically there's this idea that there's a price to be paid for pushing pushing hard in athletics, and that for the average person it's not worth it, basically, that you're going to end up with like a lot of injuries. And I think specifically around strength training or strength sports.
Mhm.
So what would your take on that be then?
Um, I mean, personally, like I understand that training more often, training with higher intensities, training with higher volumes are likely to increase your risk of injury a little more so than if you weren't doing those things.
Yeah.
However, I think that if you are adequately prepared to do those things and you are fully willing and invested in doing those things, that I'm not 100% sure, unless you're like on PEDs, bleeding from the nose in the gym multiple times a week type of
Mm-hmm.
situation, that
Yeah.
it's inherently more taxing on your body.
Yeah.
Because I know, I mean, as a power lifter, I'm not like a high level power lifter, but I train pretty hard 4 days a week. And I know people like Sophia is a pro, she has her pro card. She trains, multiple times a week. Like, I don't think you could look at her and be like, you're unhealthy. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I don't know. I feel like it's kind of an odd take that like training in general is just going to be like, there's this trade-off from doing like basically general strength, like if you were doing like 2 days a week of like general strengthening versus like 4 days a week of like SBD, high intensity strength work. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just can't see, given that you're adequately prepared and you're invested in the training, that it's like that there's like this health trade-off. I
Yeah.
just like, and I can't, like, I don't even understand what that health trade-off would necessarily be. Like, you're like an increase in injury risk. You know what I mean? Like, potentially, yes.
Yeah.
But like, for powerlifting, especially, like the injury risk is already extremely low. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
willing to experience, one musculoskeletal injury per 1,000 hours of your training, then like, is that unhealthy? I don't know. Like, having an MSK injury, like, make you an unhealthy person? I don't know. I just think that's like it's kind of weird. It's an odd verbiage to me.
Yeah.
I mean, like the way that it's worded, the terms that are being used. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know you might have a slightly different take.
Um, I guess I don't think it's a very different take. I would say that I definitely have to acknowledge that I don't know what the answer is. What's an interesting research question to me, like I think most people in the evidence-based space would be pretty happy to admit that we all know that there's people who do no exercise, who are
Mm-hmm.
like in a heap and have lots
Mm-hmm.
of pain, and would probably have their pain helped by doing some exercise. And there's also athletes, like elite level athletes, who also have a lot of pain, and that maybe the you pass a certain threshold of you pass a threshold where the amount of training volume that's required to hit a personal record when you're that close to your genetic ceiling has like a disproportionate increase in your risk for certain injuries. The question that I find interesting and that I don't think anybody can really take a hard stance on is we don't know if there is like a point of diminishing returns where you are significantly you experience significantly less day-to-day joint pain or injury risks as like just a recreational person who trains very moderately like 3 days a week. To be perfectly honest, it would make sense to me that that would be true. Like it would make sense to me that there is, you know, one thing that I've always found to be true is that phrase of like there's no such thing as a free lunch. And I
Yep.
do think that there's a price to be paid for pushing your body to the limits for years on years in the name of setting world records or playing professional football or whatever. It's a different kind of it's a different discussion in the strength sports thing because we're generally talking more about like chronic low level joint pain. We have all these guys who are like in their 50s and have been lifting for 30 years, and they really strongly believe that like, oh, if I would have just pushed a little bit less hard, my back wouldn't hurt as much now as it does.
Well, I know,
And
yeah, like in the powerlifting world, there's like everybody loves to quote Vincenello saying the best deadlifter to ever live said that he wish he deadlifted less.
mhm,
Like there's so much more context to that statement. Like
yeah,
if he just, yeah, like maybe he like probably did too much intensity, too much volume, too much frequency, and deadlifts
mhm,
fucked him up a little bit. And it's like, I don't know about deadlifting less, but like
yeah.
manipulated the training volume a little better. I don't fucking know, but like,
The
um,
problem as I see it is that most of the arguments, like the strong arguments or takes around this, are formed around like really
clinically.
extreme examples of like a sample size of one. So the most common one that comes to my mind is Ronnie Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
Like
That's
I
he's
made
a
a
good.
meme. Yeah, I made a meme a while ago that was basically taking the piss out of that garage strength guy put up a video saying like the barbell row is like the worst back exercise in the world and you're gonna fuck yourself up with it. And just to like just take the piss out of him, I just put up a reel of like really jacked bodybuilders doing barbell rows just to be like, shut the fuck up.
Ronnie was
And
one of them, and then he was like, Ronnie's
of
in a
course,
wheelchair.
yeah, of course, the nitpickers who never comment or engage come out of the woodwork and they're like, you're really going to use Ronnie Coleman as an example for why barbell rows aren't bad for your back. But the problem is that, like, we don't have a control group for Ronnie Coleman. We
Yeah,
don't know, like, imagine what would be worse, right? Ronnie Coleman being arguably, at, obviously, people are so fucking subjective with like what type of bodybuilding
I don't care.
uh, era they like. But like, let's just say he's the best bodybuilder of all time. Okay, certainly the most accomplished, right? What would be worse? He becomes the most accomplished bodybuilder of all time, and is in a wheelchair, and his joints are all fucked up. And you know, maybe his training accelerated some of that, or he never did any of that, and just by way of his genetics, he was going to end up 90% of the way there anyway. And we just don't know
We have
how
no idea.
big that genetic component is. And it, like, to me, it I lean towards the genetics because he's an extreme example. I don't know any bodybuilder who trained at that level. And as great as he was and as hard as he trained, I'm sure there were guys who were training pretty damn close to that hard as well. I've never seen anybody who ended up as fucked up as him.
No.
So why would we blame the training when they were all doing the training? They were all taking the drugs.
Yeah. When
The
that's,
only
why would
difference
we
between
blame
him
that
and
when
all the
that's
other
not the
guys.
norm? That's one
Yeah.
outlier.
Yeah. And people love to use the exception to disprove the rule, you know?
Yep.
And so I guess in closing, taking all of that into account, because I don't know, I would rather get to the end of my life having done some cool shit and have an achy elbow and an achy knee that maybe was slightly accelerated in degeneration because I squatted 200
Yeah.
plus kilos as opposed to 80. But
Yep.
like, who the fuck cares, man? Like,
Fucking
we're all
cares.
going to be in a heap.
Yeah. Insert Socrates quote.
Yeah.
The one about, a man not seeing what he was capable of before
Oh, yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
The strength and beauty
It was
of
like
which
I
his
said, like
body's capable of.
I was kind of joking when I said, like, I want to see how much these rods can take.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, like if I get to the end of my life and like my knee hurts a little bit, like, okay.
You're doing pretty well if that's all you've
fucking
got
hurt
going on.
anyways. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'd be doing a lot. I think I'd probably could be doing a lot worse. In terms of like musculoskeletal health for especially my legs. And like and what's wild to me is like when I did general strength training and like a lot of the functional stuff, and like I trained mostly with kettlebells, like my legs were not, to use the term, I don't know, I don't want to use the term functional, right? But they work way better now. Like they're
Yeah.
strong, they're capable. Like I can just bend down. I don't worry about like bending my knee under load. Like I don't think about anything really. Like when I'm taking like I jump, like we have this little porch and it's like 3 stairs and I always jump the stairs. Like I don't know, like out of habit, not like a fun frolicky thing. It's like I always do that,
Yeah.
and I just don't think and like before I started powerlifting is
Yeah.
I was always worried about shit like that because my legs never felt that strong and I just didn't have that much confidence or trust in them. And then when I started powerlifting, which would technically be like that more taxing stress on your body, they got way stronger. And now I have way more confidence and trust in what they can do. You know what I mean? So like for me personally, and again, it's N=1, but like I've improved like my overall, I feel like that's improved my health overall considerably than rather than not doing those things. Could I have started barbell squatting heavy and got my legs really strong without powerlifting? Yes. But like it gave me this like regimented program to follow that was like, okay, now I'm barbell squatting twice a week. I'm deadlifting once a week. Like I'm doing all these leg accessories. And it was like things that I never really did before. And within a year, I was like, holy fuck, I can squat like all this weight, can deadlift all this weight. And like, these are things that I never thought that I'd really be capable of, or that my legs would be capable of, not myself, because I'm an idiot. Overly confident, I should say now. But yeah, I mean, personally for me, like powerlifting has been life-changing. So to try and say that like that's a taxing type of training and you should avoid it is like, to me, it's not. It's well worth it if you're willing to invest the time and effort into it, and you are not dumb about it. Because like, don't get me wrong, like if you're going into the gym and you're like maxing out like every training session and you're like taking PEDs and you're like just doing like stupid shit, like yes, that's probably unhealthy, But if you're going about training in an intelligible manner, like you just can't convince me that that's bad for your body. You know what I mean?
Especially when the average person
lightweight, baby, like, like D10 grinder doubles on, with 800 pounds on your back, like maybe that's a little much, especially if you're like on PEDs, it's like, but I don't know especially if you're a drug-free lifter, raw lifter, like, man, like get strong.
I'm inclined to just go with the Occam's razor answer of most of the issues that people encounter are age related and just the normal degradation of human bodies over time. Like I was doing much stupider training when I was like 16, 17, had no back pain at all,
Yeah.
and now there's some days I'm going to be 30 next year, and there's some days I wake up and my back just hurts,
Mhm.
and sometimes it doesn't hurt at all when I'm deadlifting a PR, and sometimes it hurts like shit when I'm deadlifting like 60%,
Dude, like 2 weeks ago, or like 3 weeks ago, I got off the couch and I just like hopped up like I normally would, and my hip did this like weird jerky thing, and it was just
Mhm.
like the pain was like it was like I was like, what the just did I just do? You know?
Just
And like
dislocation.
literally, like it affected my sleep that night. I couldn't roll
Yeah.
over. And then the next day it was like I got up and it hurt and I was like limping around. And then, like, as I was walking and moving around about the day, like it started to get better. And then literally the day after that, it was gone. And I like
Yeah.
went into squat and I like did my normal squat workout and I was like, the fuck was that?
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess I'm getting older, and it's just like, to speak to the age related changes, I feel like that's stuff that's naturally going to happen. And who's to
Yeah.
say that if I wasn't taxing my, like, you get to the end of your lifespan, like, who's to say that the age related changes are worse because you did training? Like,
That's it. Like it's
you know,
just it's so hard to tease out like what the causation is there.
yeah. And then if you
And
think of, I know that's a very, the image that went viral, the MRI images comparing like the older, the weightlifter,
yeah.
the quad index of the weightlifter and the quad index of the sedentary person. They were like both in their 60s or 70s, and like the weightlifter had like still a significant amount of muscle mass,
Right,
and
yeah.
still a significant amount of bone density, and the sedentary person's was like fucking withering away.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I know
this
that
is
there's
it.
the famous Penlay. Oh my god, I feel so bad because he's not with us anymore. Glenn Penlay.
Glenn Pendley, yeah.
Yeah. So there's like a famous video of him somewhere where he's like saying, he's like, I'd rather be 60 years old with a little bit of knee pain and the abilities that I have. And like, from the lifetime of training, I'd
Hmm.
rather go through, I hurt my knee a couple of times. It hurts a little bit now, but I still have this high level of function
Yeah.
rather than like the person who struggles to stand up from the toilet. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Well,
you're in pain and you're weak.
hmm.
So like I'd rather be in pain and strong than be in pain and weak. So that's kind of my
Yeah.
points on that.
All of this stuff for me gets put in perspective anytime I go to visit my granny because she's 90. I don't know if she's already 95 or 94. She's old anyway.
Yeah.
And she's in a nursing
Those
home.
genetics, man. It's the
Yeah, and
the Irish genetics.
I know. Small women live a long time. Short women, statistically have good outcomes for lifespan. But when you go into a nursing home, it is so grim, so grim, and it really puts into perspective like what are the things that you should actually be worried about in terms of like where you're going to be in 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like to have some knee pain, have some back pain, but still be able to sit up out of a chair. Like we talk about these things about, say, the wear and tear of training as if these questions exist in a vacuum, like all else being equal, but all else is never equal. Like that,
Yep.
the real world doesn't work like that. So maybe what if it turned out that by training hard, you increase your odds of, I don't know, joint degradation by X percentage. But if you don't
Compare
train
that.
hard, you miss out on the cognitive protective effects of training by X percentage. Would you rather have an increased risk of dementia when you're in your 70s and
But
have
not
some
not
sore
not
knees and a
only
sore
that
back?
though, just because you might have a little bit of joint pain, if you have, your bone density
Yeah.
is greater than, the next person, and you still have your muscle mass and you still have some muscle strength, like
Mm-hmm.
that's going to go a long way physically too. You'll
Yeah.
like, uh fall risk, right? You're going to be less
Yeah.
likely to like break something if you fall. There's a lot of things that will mediate that. It's just really interesting to me when people try to make that wear and tear argument. It's like, I don't know, man.
Mm.
I've seen some old people like not be able to move well, and they're not strong and they're very frail, and like,
Yeah.
And like I just that kind of freaks me out a little bit, you know, like that's I don't want to be that at all. Like I don't want to struggle to get myself around my house or to the bathroom or like anything like that, you know, like I
Yeah.
want to still keep some level of like muscle strength and physical ability for sure. Like,
That
you know,
actually was one of the most popular memes I ever made, was comparison of like all, I don't know if you saw that, but it's like a old man who's jacked and
so glad
a
I never ruined my
little
body. Oh
withered,
my God, that's
a little
beautiful. Yes, dude, that's literally what I'm talking or what we're
it's a little
talking about.
withered like sausage guy
Yeah.
in a wheelchair being like, so glad I never ruined my body with that strength training stuff.
Yeah. Like we're
And
all
it's
gonna
like,
get old. Like
yeah,
what physical abilities do you want to hold on to as you age?
yeah,
You know, this is all competitive lifting, all that shit aside. I want to get, you know, big guns. It's like, all right, cool. But like, let's talk about how we're all going to look in 50 years.
yeah.
Mhm.
So we'll keep fighting the good fight, Mark.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. I'm
we'll
actually going to
wrap
go
it
train
there, I
now.
think. I doubt knowing people's attention span on Instagram